I'm Mike Stoecklein. I used to work here in Appleton, travel back and forth between the Twin Cities, came here last year. And one of the things that we talked about last year was the work that we do, people are trying to get some sort of results in whatever they're doing, and they're trying to learn through different tools and techniques how to get those results. And it's a promise of the next tool that's going to be helpful. And many times those tools do work and they do achieve the results. Many times it's due to the Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect, lighting, manufacturing. They turned the lights up in the Hawthorne factory and productivity improved. They turned the lights down in the Hawthorne factory and the productivity improved. It wasn't the lighting. They were paying attention to something. And anytime you do something novel, the first couple times it's going to work. The problem is when people learn these tools and they said, hey, great, that works. It worked over here, we should spread it. We should move it around in other places. Or it worked in this company, we should have other companies try to do this. So they try to spread it into other systems, and inevitably it fails because it produces this curve of results that essentially becomes the flavor of the month, and you've all experienced this, right? The next new wonderful thing we must all follow. The greatest thing since sliced bread. In the work that we do, we talk about, is this inevitable? Is this all that we can do, or is there more that we need to do? Now, what I want to talk about, and I've only got 20 minutes, but there's two, since we're in college, I'm going to talk about epistemology and ontology, because I can use words like ology when I'm in college, right? Epistemology, theory of knowledge. One reason that this trap of looking for tools to get us results is because we don't understand the different types of knowledge that we need to solve different types of problems. Okay, so I'm going to continuum of problem solving and types of problems. Over here I'm going to talk about a convergent problem, and I'm going to give you problem A. Here's problem A. Here's a square. Everyone make a square on your sheet of paper. Can you do that? Okay, work along. Now, make a square twice the size, twice the area of that square. Anybody know how to do that? You can work on it, we can try to figure it out. But what I'll do is I'll say, take the diagonal of that square and make a new square. And the new square is twice the area. Now, you don't have to go through the intellectual effort to figure out why that works, but it will work. And it'll work every time. So this is problem A, a problem of abstract world, but I can give you the recipe and you can solve the problem. Part of the problem with why we end up in this trap is we end up thinking that we can solve all problems if somebody gave us a recipe. And more than that is required, we need skills. So here's problem B. Okay, we got that thing working now. Okay, move out. Bigger pictures, right? Okay, I'm just going to go to this, as fluid as can be. Look at that. Flavor of the month, and pudding, comfort of the comfort zone, where tools will follow. The latest new wonderful thing we must all follow. So what I did was I took this thing and talked about problem-solving methods to create local communities, and there's different kinds of problems that need to be solved. Convergent, we're tracking along, okay? And on the other end is divergent. Problem A is an example of a convergent problem. I can give you the solution. There it is. There's the solution. And you can apply it, and you don't have to think about why it worked or how it worked, but it will work. And you can predict in advance that it will always work. So that's problem A. Problem B is, in the real material world, you got some sort of a column, you got some body at the top. You drop it to the bottom, and you say, how fast was it going when it hit the ground? What was the terminal velocity? Well, I can give you a stopwatch, I can give you a formula, multiply it by 32 feet per second, and you can do it. And you can still get the answer. The reason this one is moved over here is that's a problem in the real material world. And you don't know what might happen between when you dropped it and when it fell. It might be affected by other factors. The wind might come along. Somebody might come along and grab it. So it's still on this side, but your predictability, the probability of your predictability is going away. Problem C. Bake 2 loaves of white bread, okay? Now I can give you a recipe, and I can give you the ingredients, and you're likely to make some passable white bread. But is every bit of yeast different, same or different? Are there differences? What if I cook something at a different altitude? Does it make a difference? The difference between a great chef and somebody that merely follows a recipe is somebody who's transferred the skills they learn through knowledge into art. And something different happens with problem C is I'm trying to produce something through another human being. And now I got the human factor involved, which is a quintessential reason and the distinction between a divergent problem. Because with human beings, they have the ability to make decisions on their own. You're trying to force them to do something. And to treat a human being as if it's not a human being is not a good idea. Which brings me to problem D on the far right-hand side. Any of the problems that Jason mentioned might be an example of sticky, hard-to-solve problems. Educate a young child in this day and age to be an informed critical thinker. What possible recipe could I give you to do that? There is no possible recipe. The best you can do is try to balance the opposites, to not force too hard, to try to inculcate curiosity and not dampen that curiosity over time. That bit.ly link takes you to a white paper that traces this whole discussion of epistemology, but I want to talk about that, or wrap up with epistemology to explain one of the reasons why we end up not really being able to tackle the difficult problems. And I want to readdress some of the, or get in deeper some of the things I talked about last time with ontology. And this is the introduction of a multi-ontology sense-making model. So 3 rules I'm going to introduce. Rule 1, not all situations or systems are the same. Some are ordered, and they're predictable, and some are unordered, less predictable. I just switched the continuum here, but anyway, on this side things are ordered, structured. Over here they're unordered. On the ordered side, there's 2 categories. There are systems that are obvious. Everyone can agree about what the right thing to do is. And on the right-hand side, it's complicated, which requires expertise. Up in the left-hand corner, Jason mentioned complex adaptive systems. These are different sorts of systems, and they're on the unordered side. If you start treating them as if they're ordered systems, you're going to run into difficulties. And in this lower left-hand corner is chaotic. Going back here, example of an obvious system. What country are we in? We're in the United States. Let's drive on the right-hand side. We can all agree. We do it. Everyone does it. We get along fine. We get to where we want to go. Different country, better start driving on the side that they're driving, or else you're going to have some problems. Complicated. An example is you go to the doctor when you have something wrong. Doctor helps you figure out what it is. Requires expertise. There's still a cause and effect relationship that you can understand on this side. On this side, there is no cause and effect relationship you can discern until after you've experienced it. The example that Dave Snowden describes, and this work comes from Dave Snowden from the Cognitive Edge website. He describes hosting a birthday party for 9-year-olds. And the different things that you try to do in order to generate the kind of things that you like and give that energy, or if things occur that you don't like, you shut it down and dampen it so you have a good experience. We'll be talking a little bit about that more. Great video recording, Dave Snowden explaining the children's party there at that bit.ly link. In this lower left-hand corner, there are chaotic situations. The example that sometimes uses is, what was it like the day of 9/11 when all hell was breaking loose? Everything just seemed to be turned upside down. Somebody had to figure out what to do, but it was chaos, right? Going back here to obvious. Relationship between cause and effect is clear. When we do this, we'll get that. We have many systems that are like that. Anybody that works in like a billing office, you see a certain bill of a certain type, you've got a procedure said when you see this, you do that. We can all do the right thing. Up here, there's still cause and effect is in play, but it's going to require expertise. It isn't always clear what the right thing to do, and different experts are going to give you different solutions or approaches as to what to occur. In a complex adaptive system, you might be able to see cause and effect, but only retrospectively. Only after you've interacted with the system will you say, oh, that seems to be what's going on. And in this system, cause and effect is chaotic. Back down to here. I showed you recipes with the previous example. Recipes, checklists, standard work. When people say this is the standard way we're going to do this thing, they're living in that obvious world. Medicine, engineering, many moving parts. Getting a man to the moon and back took engineering expertise. You could figure it out, cause and effect was working. Anytime you're dealing with people systems, strategic problems, things such as equity, things such as the things that Jason was mentioning, politics, whether it's big P or little p, you're dealing with a complex adaptive system and you don't even know what all the parts are in play that are affecting each other, but they are affecting each other. And then when we get into chaos, it happens in real life when people do workarounds in order to try to work around the systems or the structures that have been put in place. Many times those can lead to failure, and then you've got everybody doing things the way they want to. Okay, high-level overview of Rule 1. Different systems require different sorts of action. The correct action is based upon the system that you have. So when we have an obvious system, we can all agree. Your sense categorizing and respond, this is the category of best practice. We can all agree that's the best thing we should do. In this corner, complicated, we sense, analyze, respond. Anybody that's working on problem solving, trying to figure something out, maybe doing a certain problem solving tool, they're talking to people, trying to understand root causes, that they'll lead to good practice. In a complex adaptive system, the first thing you do is you probe. You introduce something as a catalyst that you think might generate the kind of activity that you want to see. And then the practice is going to emerge from you interacting with the system. In chaotic, because when we had 9/11, somebody had to act, somebody had to say, here's what we're going to do, you do this, you do that, you stop the airplanes, and novel practice occurs. Now, there's two ways you can get into the chaotic zone. If you enter accidentally, the first thing you need to do is stabilize. You can use the chaos zone to generate innovation. You can take what's called a shallow dive into this and say, let's loosen our constraints and try to think totally different, and you can use it in a desirable way to get what you want. The problem is, we tend to operate from something that's comfortable for us. Anybody that thinks standard work is the answer to everything lives in the obvious zone, and they think every problem can be solved by, well, let's just have standard work and let's make everyone follow the standard work. Problem is that that's not the world you're dealing with. Some people say if we just had enough experts here and enough time to solve the problem, we could figure it out. The correct action up here is going to be multiple safe-to-fail experiments. And many times that's correct. Many times you are in a complex system when you want to have multiple safe-to-fail experiments you can do. But that's not always the case. And many people like the chaotic realm. Some people manage according to introducing chaos. Anybody know anybody that likes to introduce chaos daily? Likes to manage according to introducing chaos daily? I think we can all think of some people that might be able to do that. Excuse me. Rule 3, you can move between the domains. So this is not just a categorization framework. This is a framework that you can leverage what's going on to try to introduce the kinds of action that's needed in order to get the kind of future that you would like to see, more of what you would like to see. So many times we are dealing with a complex system, and you have many parts. What you want to do here is have multiple safe-to-fail experiments that you can try to see what is it that I can change. If I change this, where do I go to see, did it reproduce what I like? If I like what it produced, how do I give it more energy and amplify it? If I don't like what it did, how do I shut it down and try something else? Over time, with some guidance, you can move some of these over to the complicated realm. Once you figure out the cause and effect relationship, you can say, I think we got this thing figured out. But be prepared to go back to complex, because the context is going to change. And the rate of change that occurs in organizations or in the world is constantly causing us to kind of go back between these two. Now, some of these things might be shoved down into, we can all agree this is the current best way we're going to do this. But that's only with a few things, and they must be agreed by all. The problem is we shove way too many of these things down and say we must all follow this one standard way of doing it. which then causes us to get into this boundary between obvious and chaotic, which that boundary is like a cliff. That boundary is more of a continuum. You're kind of continuously moving, continuously improving the current best way you do things over on that obvious side. But when you force things, when you make things overly constrained, people are going to figure out workarounds to try to make things work better. They're going to try to live in the world that you've given them, and you're going to see things that are going to cause them to fall into the chaotic realm. That little thing at the bottom represents a cliff. Very hard to climb up a cliff. You have to work your way around this in order to get out of this. That's all of the domains, and there is a fifth domain that is in the middle. So this is not really a quadrant because it has 5 parts. I mentioned ordered, unordered. In the middle, it's disordered. And many times, you're in disorder. You don't know what you're dealing with until you can ask some questions and figure out what's going on. So here's a wrap-up. Context matters. There's different problems require different types of knowledge. That's why I went into epistemology. Skills alone will not suffice. I know this is called Skillsfest, but I think you're beyond introducing skills. You have to couple it with knowledge, and you have to understand what kind of a situation or system that you're dealing with. Copy at your own risk. Many people would like to say, once they've figured out a complex adaptive system, that we can lift it and move it someplace else, and that just won't work with a complex adaptive system. So you try to take something that worked in one organization in one area and say, we figured it out and it'll work for you too. You cannot copy complex adaptive systems, solutions from one to another. That's what that says. You cannot scale, copy one group's solution to a complex problem. So back to the tool-based trap. We may not be able to eliminate it, but I think it's possible we could recognize it sooner and adjust accordingly. Those are some resources you might find useful. A lot of this did come from Dave Snowden and the work at the Cognitive Edge Group. Different resources available there. That's how you get in touch with me. I think I did it close to 20 minutes, including the writing over there. So thank you very much.